Hello, my name is Tony Mitra, and I'm speaking from Delta, British Columbia, Canada. And I have here one Miss Irina Muhina, and she is talking to us from Ontario, Canada, and she is ethnically from Russia. And the reason for this talk is I have been trying to get an ethnic Russian to to pass his or her comments on the most important geopolitical event going on now, which is the conflict in Ukraine, where the rest of the Western world has projected Russia as the only culprit which has invaded Ukraine without any reason, and it needs to be controlled, it needs to be defeated, it needs to be sanctioned, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to know whether Russians actually feel that way because I do not buy this story completely. So, after a lot of struggle, after a lot of effort, it has not been easy to find a Russian willing and free to speak and in English. I have located Miss Irina Mohina. I leave the field to her. Thank you, Irina. Go ahead.
Thank you, Tony, for such a nice introduction. And yes, my name is Irina, and I am from not only from Russia, I'm from Siberia. I have been trained in Siberian University as a mathematician. I have PhD in artificial intelligence and from Soviet Union. So my education is from Soviet Union. And after university, we have been living in Ukraine for 10 years. So after the Soviet Union was demolished, and 30 years ago, this was a demolition act. I call it color revolution. We moved to Canada. And we have 3 children, who one was born in Siberia, one in Ukraine, and third one in Canada. So I personally feel very engaged and very loyal to all these 3 countries. So this conflict is really pain to everyone who was deeply involved into the Soviet culture, where 15 republics were living like a one family. And this was a unique experiment in the history of humankind, when not money was driving the show, but the development of the people. We had a very high level of culture, education, as many of you can be aware. So the Soviet Union collapse is the highest tragedy of the 20th century. And this is how the country of Ukraine, which had no real state history before it became a republic, one of 15 republics in Soviet Union, level of living, and this is my personal experience, it's not reading anything, and we have been living there from 86 to 95. The level of living in Ukraine was the highest, even compared to European country. Ukraine had the highest level of scientific research, of the high level of educational people, the cultural level, and everything was so well positioned as one of the strongest power of the people who were living in nice climate compared to Siberia. And when I was living there, when the independence happened, and I believe that was already manipulated, because the 8 months before the independence voting was the voting for the people to say if they want to keep USSR or not. And to my biggest surprise, 85% was saying that we want to keep Soviet Union, and 8 months after, 85% said that they want independence. And I was part of this. So it's from personal experience. And immediately after this voting in 1992, the whole history of Ukraine became rewritten. And I'm aware now that Canadian diaspora of Ukrainian people who left Europe after Second War have been heavily engaged to provide Ukraine with all the rewritten history, where they started to rewrite the history in school, in university, to become anti-Russia. For 30 years, this territory of Ukraine was under heavy management to help West to start to build some anti-Russian coalition. And they even have a books which called anti-Russian. And I know that genetically Russian and Ukrainian are brothers. And this is what was very sad to see how many people were losing their common sense and history under such a heavy manipulation. And in 2014, final COP happened in Kiev. It's called Maidan, when the government, which was a legal government of Ukrainian president, have thrown away 3 months before re-election. And this was absolutely completely managed by people from the overseas to get the government who can be manipulated. And this is what we have seen in the last 8 years. And because my part of my professional experience is working on the market, global market, I have seen how money can throw out any governments if enough money get invested or get pour into the whatever the country is. And Ukraine became a territory where Russia now draw the line that the West could not get more close to where the NATO bases are, bio laboratory. And this is what was confirmed during US hearing from the Senate, where they confirmed that bio labs have been installed in territory of Ukraine. And for the last 8 years, so much military help, so much bases, so much Western training against Russia and against Donbass and Lugansk, three provinces of Ukraine which did not agree with the 2014 COP. And they said that they don't want to belong to this Ukraine, which has anti-Russian politics. Yes, Tony.
You said 3 regions, Lugansk and Donbass. Which is the third one?
No, two regions, Lugansk and Donbass. Okay. And this is 8 million people. But for people to understand, the economy of Ukraine have been such unbalanced that almost 80% of the GDP of the Ukraine of 2014 were coming from these 2 territories, because they have all the mining, they have all the gas, they have all the resources, and Ukraine has known for their industry. Ukraine has such a strong industry in the Soviet time, which everything have been destroyed, privatized, and this is where now we see the huge struggle and risk around the city where we have been living, Zaporizhia, where they have the biggest nuclear station, which has 6 reactors. And Soviet industry, I hope many of you are aware, was very advanced in terms of the scientific research. And our nuclear industry and nuclear stations were the one which were competing with the Western Gauss, for example, which were looking for the business, because Ukraine has one of the strongest nuclear heritage from Soviet time. And immediately after this happened, after 2014, they started to replace nuclear, I don't know, the graphites, the ones which are getting inside, for the Western Gauss. So for them, it's a business. But the problem is that these 2 technology, nuclear technologies, they are not comparable. They are not identical. So everything which have been done just for the business purpose, profit, it's something which is running Western society, especially lately. And this is where Ukraine became a territory where they were taking everything which have been done, destroying, making people at such a low level of living that people now, and this is a typical colonization from the Western. We know this for years, when they conquer, divide and conquer. And Russia was after Soviet Union collapsed, and this perestroika and glasnost, which was a totally failed memes, became obvious for majority of educated people that capitalism in Russia now is just, we have a bunch of super rich people who are paying their attention to the global agenda and have no interest to develop a population. And I believe this is a Western educational system have been biased to help people to understand that reality is that we are living technologically in the very different different level of things which get replaced by digitalization, virtualization, and all this informational industry itself have been moved to less developed country like China and Malaysia, and now India became one of the biggest job market. But the problem is that Western itself lost ability to support their own needs, and this is what we see in drug, in the medical, everywhere where the production have been moved. So the challenge, what we see in Ukraine, it's a reflection of the crisis, which is a global crisis. And I think it's a very sensitive for people to start to pay attention, because it's literally touching everyone, not only in Ukraine and Russia, unfortunately, but in Europe, where the gas prices became 1,000% more than a year ago. And it's not because Russia doesn't want to sell, because Russia now has a capitalistic relationship where the profit is something which they are aiming for, but it's because of sanctions. And sanctions get introduced by US. So US now looking at the Europe as a market for their energy, which they became as an exporter of the gas in 2016. So now Russia has no way because of sanctions. And this is because of sanctions, Europe has no cheap prices for their energy. But US has a large market to provide with the prices which is highest. So the 30 years ago, Soviet Union was destroyed because this was a competition for the US. And we know that it was two countries which were very close in the space program, in the educational program, in the science. Even though now we are using mostly all Soviet scientific researches in many industry globally. And now when the Soviet heritage is gone, 30 years, nothing was invested in Russia, that Russia can become a competition in new informational industry, society. So when its heritage is gone, now they need another victim. And another victim to survive, it's now seems to be Europe. And political power, political will in Europe to protect their own citizenship, I see in negative territory. And it's only one country or two countries, which I can see clearly can at least express they are willing to protect. It's Hungary and to some degree Poland, and maybe slightly Serbia. But all other countries, they are like ships. They are getting and they are losing their ability to be competitive. So now we see China, who is growing in their ability to provide everyone with their own production. And indeed, Russia turned their gas and all other energy to the east, where the India is buying this. They are buying it cheap, but they are selling this to the west with the profit. So everything became around money, and nothing about the people ability to get level of understanding to comprehend a complexity. And media became such a disinformational, I would say it slightly. And the speech of freedom, or freedom of meetings, or anything. We looked at the Canada convoy, and we saw that it's all became questionable, because now we have one agenda, green agenda, unisex agenda, and this is something which we're supposed to follow. As a person who grew up in Soviet Union, and I was around 30 years when it was demolished, I can say that propaganda and all the filtering of news, what happened in Soviet Union, it's far away. It's like a child, it's like a kindergarten compared to what we see here with all the digital platform and all YouTube. And we have seen this when the Trump, as a president of United States, I'm sorry, I think this is one of the highest title which I can imagine, was taking off the Twitter with 80 millions of the followers without even any notice. So to me, the world became very much unaware about the reality, because people are spending too much time in virtuality, in virtual digital platform, social medias, which especially have been designed by people with money to take away our attention, our time, our social connections, our ability to help each other, and to sacrifice some of our freedom, that our government and state would be aware that we are one who are assuming living in democratic society and still have institutes and still have apparatus which supposed to protect human rights, democracy, and free market. This is my 15 minutes summary.
Hello. So that was my talk with Irina, the first part of the long talk. She is the first ethnic Russian that I was able to speak with on record to cover what I consider the most important geopolitical event of the world today, most important since the Second World War, where the Ukraine-Russia conflict is only the very small tip of a very large iceberg. There are lots of things behind it, and the narrative from the West, the official narrative from the West, is that Russia is an aggressor and is without provocation invaded Ukraine and is destroying democracy and so on. I do not buy this, but I'm not the only one. There are quite a few Western reporters that are covering this subject, although they are kept out of the mainstream media as far as possible. But I do not see corresponding views from Russians. And one problem is I don't speak Russian, so I've been trying to contact such people who might be able to tell me their view in some form of English that is understood by me and my listeners. And Irina was the first such person, born in Siberia, spent many years in Ukraine, and then many decades in Canada, a couple of decades in Canada. And here is her view. I hope I will be able to get more contacts of actual Russians living in Russia and elsewhere through people like Irina. So thank you for watching.